and I'm ripping off drug dealers, getting high while my babies are sleeping there. Drug dealers banging on my door because I ripped them off, smashing my window.
Advisor to the president of Metis Nation of Saskatchewan, Brennan Merasty, joined me on the podcast to talk about his journey through trauma and addiction.
I was growing up, and it was the constant babysitters that came through the home that were sexually abusing us, and it led to other behaviors.
Despite his crack addiction and alcoholism, Brennan managed to build a meaningful political career in the northern community of Ile-à-La-Crosse Saskatchewan.
Now, and I became this advocate during the day, but an addict at night.
But in the end, he found himself sitting alone in a garage, using to die, but it wasn't working.
I'm crying, I'm holding this rope, ready to put it over the rafters to hang myself. My phone goes off, and it's Mariana. She's FaceTiming me, and she's crying. She's talking suicide, 11 years old.
Wow.
Holy fuck, Brennan. It's time to wake up. Your daughters need you. I'm alone, and I'm lost. I'm scared shitless.
Yeah.
And I don't know how.
After losing his job, his home, his family, he leaned on his support system and found his way into recovery. That's when he found ceremony.
And in that first round, I remember he asked me to be the doorman, the rock man, and I closed the door, and he starts drumming, splashing the rocks. And in that moment, the rush from my toes all the way up through my body, out my eyes, are tears flowing. All the pain and the hurt that I carried, I couldn't control it. It just flowed as soon as he started hitting that drum. Kaimata, Kaimata, the drum song, and the words of the elder in the ceremony, Kaimata, no more crying, no more hurting, no more pain.
In this episode, Brennan talked to me about how his alcoholism and crack addiction got started in Ile-à-La-Crosse Saskatchewan, how the trauma from sexual abuse and violence in his home fueled his addiction, how he found and maintains his sobriety, and how he's using his lived experiences to serve his government, Metis Nation of Saskatchewan, as they move towards self-governance. But before we get into it, what's up? My name's Dan, podcaster, keynote speaker, and advocate, and this is Hardnox Talks, your addictions podcast. Now, let's get into my talk with Brennan Merasty.
This is Hardnox Talks.
Brennan, what's going on?
Good morning, everybody out there. Brennan Merasty here from Saskatchewan, Ile-à-La-Crosse. Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you.
It's good to have you, man. Your radio voice kicked in right there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Uncle Robert is legendary in Northern language broadcasting, so runs in the blood.
Cool, man. Cool. We've been going back and forth for a while now. I met you at a Shirley Isbister introduced us.
Yes.
A little while ago, and I Shirley will always hold a spot in my heart. It was through Trache House, through Comfy, that I early recovery. I stayed in that sober house, so helped me a lot. But we've been going back and forth, so it's nice to finally have you. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in?
No, definitely. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited. I've been doing a lot of public speaking, engaging, and emceeing around for probably 25 years. Mm-hmm. And coming into this podcast, being here, knowing I was coming here, I was nervous, and I was almost going to back out last minute. I was so nervous.
Oh no!
But couldn't do that to you. I've heard your show a few times. Mm-hmm. Again, like you said, we've been going back and forth. So excited to be here and excited to share and be a part of that process.
So were you actually on the phone with the president outside,
or
were you just like pumping yourself up? I got
this.
I can do this.
That's what I do before I go to bed. It's funny. It's bedtime. Your body's tired. Your mind's tired. But I'm laying there and my mind's constantly working. And sometimes I'm sitting there talking to myself. My wife and kids are used to it by now, but it's what I do. It's just the mind's always working, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, let's jump in. You're a guy in recovery.
Yeah.
2 years, right?
Just over 2 years. Yeah. February 26, 22 was the first day of my recovery, my new journey. Mm-hmm. And that was me leaving home, which is Ile-à-La-Crosse or Saskatchewan in our language. Mm-hmm. And it was me leaving home to disconnect and find my space, find my place in this world, and time for Brennan to take care of Brennan. And I needed to disconnect. Yeah. I needed to disconnect from all the toxicity, from all the life that I was leading, mm-hmm. The family, the friends, the pressures, and just disconnect and be in a space that I can grow and discover who Brennan is. Because of my background, I've lived a life that I wanted to be what people needed or what people wanted me to be, the perception. Do they like me? I used to run my mind crazy and drive myself crazy thinking, oh shit, I fucked up here. And, people were upset. I needed to make amends to this. And, this is what they need and this is what I got to be, rather than taking care of my being and who I am, my spirit, and grounding myself to be Brennan. And so that disconnection, February 26th, I woke up after a night, after a day of smoking crack again, and just calling her quits. And I was like, when it's time, let's go. Made a call, got a ride south, and here I am. I came to Mloud House with Comfy, and I never knew the place existed. For years I drove by 22nd Street, never knew that's what those places were, And I'm like, I don't know if I can go there though. I held off for weeks coming. And
why? Ego?
Partly because ego. And I thought I was too good for that place, for the neighborhood, for the area. I can't live in that. Yet I was living in a shithole. My life was in a turmoil. I was evicted. I was homeless. And when I say shithole, it's not to disrespect anybody's home or anything, but it was where I was in my life. I was homeless. I couldn't take care of myself, and you're sitting there in a room that had no heat, a home that had no heat. Most days woke up to no groceries, -50 outside, and I'm living in the coldest room, staying in the coldest room of the house because the walls, the insulation and stuff weren't properly done, and so no lighting, and going to bed with 3 pairs of socks, a call saw, sweatpants, 3 sweaters, a toque, and 3 blankets every night.
There's a lot. There's a bunch of layers here that I want to talk about. I mean, because I just did a episode with Elder Peter Morin from Sandy Bay, and in fact, that episode just dropped last night. It's live now. A great episode. He talks about the grandfathers. He talks about his land-based healing, and I learned a lot. I was honored to be able to capture that and bring those teachings to my community. That was beautiful. But he was talking about how he would go to the bush and how all of the culture was always present, but he wasn't seeing it. Now, coming from Ile-à-Crosse, you said you had to get out of the toxicity, you had to get away from all of that, and you're living in honestly, I lived in a house with no heat right here in Saskatoon. When I slept on a couch with no cushions. I cuddled with a toaster oven to stay warm. I don't know how I didn't burn. But why don't we take a step back and we'll unpack all of the things that I just mentioned there. But why don't we take a step back, and how did this get started for you? Were you born into the party?
So I had 2 loving parents, I guess, or 2 parents that knew how to work and provide, and that they did. They did their job as parents in that regard, or that sense. My mom at 36 years, I was 36 years old, and one day I'm sitting in her apartment after during a time when I had to leave Ile-à-Crosse again because my wife at the time, my girl, had kicked me out, had enough of my addiction, and so sent me on my way, and we came up with a plan. Part of Brennan's manipulation is I'll go to mom's, I'll detox, I'll stay there for 30 days, and I'll come home, I'll be okay. And so one day I'm sitting with mom in that moment, and she looks at me out of nowhere while we're watching a show in the afternoon and just says, I didn't know how to love you guys. All I knew how to do was work, and I didn't know how to love you guys. And that really stung. It stung. And in that moment, it just helped me realize, better understand my mom. Did it get me to sobriety and to being drug-free? No, not in that moment, but it helped me get to a point of understanding of her choices, her behaviors as children, as growing up, and the way she was firm and assertive with us kids, the structure, the rules, the chores, and so on and so forth, right? And it helped me. It opened my mind to get curious in regards to who my mom was, where she came from, because as a Indigenous person, as a Metis person, proud, born and raised in Ile-à-Crosse, I never touched on my mom's side of the family. She's from South Africa, Port Elizabeth to be exact. She's East Indian, moved to Canada when she was 14, became a medical lab and x-ray technician, met my dad by working in Ile-à-Crosse Hospital. And my dad is a proud Métis from Northern Saskatchewan. They met, and here we are, my brothers and me, and today I'm proud to say we're Makrindu, which is Métis, Cree, and Hindu, right? An acronym for that. And I'm proud to say that because that's who I am. My mom, I never acknowledged that side of the family until my later 30s, like I said, and that's what it was. My mom knew how to work. She provided. My dad did that. They worked. They built a home, but they didn't know how to love us. They didn't know how to nurture us. So when we came into this world, my brothers and I, we came into a home that was full of abuse, alcoholism. My My dad was struggling with addiction, alcohol mainly, the violence and abuse that he created or brought into the home because of that, because of his upbringings. And I didn't know about his choices. I didn't understand his choices until after he passed, which was March 1, 2013. I didn't know my dad truly until after he was gone, right? But so when we come into this world, my dad's an alcoholic. He's struggling with that. He's abusing our mom. There's violence. Not sure why. So part of that, as I got older, I started to hear and learn that, okay, mom was working night shift as a lab and x-ray technician. So, she's on call at night, gets called to come into work, nobody to babysit me, watch over me as a young toddler. So sometimes she'd drop me off at the party where my dad was, or there was constant babysitters coming through the home. And there's 3 boys. I'm the oldest of the 3, and my 2 younger boys brothers are born and brought into the world. And we're going through all these constant different babysitters. And I vaguely remember who they are. Because the 0 to 10 years of my life are very vague. I haven't really gotten there yet in regards to those good memories or the bad memories, right? I remember some of the toxicity, and it's related to the behaviors I established over the years. So we're going through all of that, witnessing all the violence and the drugs, or the alcohol, sorry. And the home is broken. Mom and dad, dad's cheating. Coming home, I see him grab the vase off the dining table and hit mom over the head mid-afternoon one day. And just various things like that, which led to me, not why I started drinking, but at 12 years old, I was drinking. Later, 12 years old, started drinking because it was the thing to do with friends. Pressure was there. Or maybe not pressure, but the cool things, right? You wanted to be part of that crowd that was busy and active.
So were you, like, when you were at that age and you remember seeing these things, do you remember thinking that was wrong? Or did you remember thinking that this was just how life is and everybody's like this? Just
how life is, right? I didn't know if it was right or wrong. We weren't nurtured properly to understand that. Like I said, my parents knew how to work, knew how to love us. But they knew how to work and provide for us, but they didn't know how to love us. They didn't nurture us to be that way. And I will get into that a little bit as when I get to the point when I got to Mloud House and I got in that space to grow and nurture and understand and connect those dots, right? So as time went on, I started drinking at 12, the latter part, and a lot of it came with people in the community that were working at the mine sites. They go for 30 days, come home for 2 weeks, and they were drinking, right? And that was their way. And I tag along, little 12-year-old, and then cocaine is being introduced into Ile-à-La-Crosse, maybe before, but I was starting to see it at the parties with the friends, and I said no to it for the longest time, and finally one day at 13 years old, I just walked into this house, which was 2 doors down from where I was living, and I just said, fuck it, and give me some Coke.
13 years old?
They were busting it on the plate at the table. It was being laid out there, lined up, and I did 2 solid lines, and I'll tell you, I fell in love. I never looked back. The rush that I felt, the energy, the adrenaline that I got from those 2 lines, and it became my go-to. It became my place of, right on, here I am.
So when you mentioned you just gave up, you walked in at 13 years old.
Yeah.
You said, fuck it.
I said, fuck it.
So what happened before that? Was there something
at that time, parents were divorced. So my parents had got divorced. Mom moved to Saskatoon to finish off the medical lab and x-ray technician courses to further develop her skill set so she can run a lab properly in the hospitals and so on and so forth with x-rays, blood work. So we moved to Saskatoon. I guess there was cheating going on with Dad. I didn't realize it then. Again, I didn't know a lot of things until after he died or as I got older. So all the violence, the cheating and things like that, she got sick of it. And while we're living in Saskatoon, I'm sitting there and I'm like, she gets a call from Dad and it's, you need to get yourself checked. And so I didn't know what it was, but then she tells him, that's it, I've had enough. I want a divorce. She tells me I'm the oldest and I break down crying. I think back to that moment, I remember it like yesterday, but I don't know if I realized what that meant. But it broke me down. I started crying, and then the family was separated. I knew there was already tension because we were living separate from our dad. And so the divorce happened, and so we started manipulating as kids do, well, Mom's being too harsh with the rules and grounding me. I'm going to go live with Dad now. And so we played that game back and forth for a while. When I would go north, I'd find a girl, get a girlfriend, and wouldn't want to come back to Saskatoon and back and forth, right? So the home was broken even more because of the divorce and not only the violence and the constant babysitters, not knowing that my brothers were abused sexually, not knowing that I was, or, you put it away so far back, that led to a behavior of, I'm not against gay people. I have aunts and uncles, they're gay. I have family that's gay, but I became homophobic. I became uncomfortable. And I couldn't figure it out. I never took the time to figure it out. It wasn't until I started taking care of Brennan that I connected those dots, right? Where does this behavior stem from?
So it wasn't actually that you were homophobic. It's just that thought pattern put you into a place of pain.
It put me into a place of pain.
Okay.
And like when I was in Mloud House, that space gave me the time to connect the dots. Where does this behavior stem from?
Yeah.
Where did this thought, this feeling come from? So I would connect with the counselor there through talking out loud like this, and working through it, would connect that behavior to a traumatic experience when I was growing up. And it was the constant babysitters that came through the home that were sexually abusing us. And it led to other behaviors that I established. And this being one, uncomfortable around them, right? And not even wanting to sit next to a guy for those reasons. And then connecting the dots with my brother as bits and pieces of his story came out when he was under the influence. To this day, he hasn't touched on it, hasn't healed from it. We'll work on that, But I got to a point where, okay, I can understand this behavior, this traumatic experience to this, which led to me.
This is why I'm connecting this uncomfortable feeling to.
And it's helped me grow, right? It's helped me become who I am today.
Yeah.
And not, I guess you could say, letting go of what was. I don't want to live in fear of what was anymore. I want to change who I am and be a better person. And the way I put it is, I do better to be better. Not to be better than anybody else, but to be better than who I was before. Yeah.
So was there ever any stints in your life leading up to your stint of sobriety now that you did find recovery, that you did find some healing and then slipped back in?
Oh, there were so many. Like I said, Amy kicked me out the one time and I moved with Mom, who was in North Battleford, and I stayed with her for 30 days. So part of I'm a good talker. I'm a good manipulator. I'm a politician. All that good stuff, right?
Why'd you gotta throw politician in there, man?
Because politicians learn the game, right? You got to appease people with your words, and we become magicians with that. And that's what I did with addiction. Addiction taught me to be that manipulator, to be that con artist. And at times, to this day, I call myself the king of cons, and I say that with my daughters. Don't con me. Remember, I'm the king. Look at me. Tell me the truth, and let's work through this together. Anyways, you go back to that. I would go to detox. Well, Amy would blow up. Amy, my partner, would take a lot of shit. She took it, and it built up, and she would explode. And when she exploded, that's when Brennan gets kicked out, nowhere else to go. And so I'd go to detox, and 2-3 days in, after sleeping it off and waking up a little bit more refreshed and eating better, I would say, hey, I'm feeling better. Can I come home now? I would manipulate the workers in that place that I'm doing better. I can go. And then I'd go home, and it just became a cycle of me manipulating the system, right? And taking the shortcuts and not really taking the time to focus on me and who I am and why I was there. Why did I fuck up? Why did I end up in this situation? Never went there, and I would take what society wanted from me and dish it out, reiterate it, and make it my own.
I'm hearing a lot of ties to relationship here with and particularly around Amy. I hope we can say her name. You mentioned it. So what I'm hearing though is that the only thing that really shocked you into wanting to find recovery was the threat of the loss of your relationship with Amy. Was there other triggers that sort of snapped you out of it, or was it really focused around that?
So at that time, it was always like I was out of my comfortable space, right? I was going to be alone, and I couldn't be alone. I didn't know how to be alone. The parents were divorced. I didn't want that for my kids in my mind. So being alone was part of the struggle. Amy took care of us very well, catered to me, even though she didn't have to. She did that, and so it was losing that safe space in my mind, which it was, right? And that's what drove me to manipulate and find my way back in, to be back in that space where I could be comfortable and take advantage of the situations. And I did that for years. I did that for a lot of years. I broke a lot of promises. I even told her when we were pregnant with our first daughter, Tiara, at a young age, I said, I'm going to do things differently than my parents did. I'm going to love her. I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you everything you want. And I was working at the uranium mine site at that time. And so the money was coming in from my end, and she was just fresh out of high school and things like that, and no path yet, no career path. And so I would take care of that with my job, my money, my vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
but I used it to my advantage, to belittle her, to control her, to dictate what life was going to be for us,
Mm-hmm.
the parties, and with all of that, there was some cheating when I was at the mines happening on her end, my end, created insecurities, created toxic behavior of jealousy, anger.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? The controlling behavior was the worst thing ever, because I'd phone her every 5 minutes. What are you doing? I conned my employer to get me a cell phone while I was on site so that I could be available to people,
Mm-hmm.
because part of my job was meeting and greeting new hires, new visitors to site, VIP tours, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I conned the employer to give me the cell phone, but only to use that cell phone to call Amy every 5 minutes to say, hey, what are you doing? Who are you with? And I'd be on the phone with her just breathing, just because the control, the jealousy, the anger, all those toxic behaviors that became because of the experiences I had, right?
When you were living that, when you were in that and feeling that jealousy and the fear, really, it all boils down to fear from what I'm hearing. It's all fear.
Yeah.
Was there ever any point where like, holy crap, I understand why my parents are the way they are now?
Not in that moment. It wasn't until later on. Like, there was 25 years of this. 25 years, at 12 years old, starting and doing it for the fun of it. And it became like, when I did those first 2 lines of cocaine, I fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to tell Amy, I love you, but I never did. I go back. I never loved Amy. I didn't even know who Amy was. I didn't even know who I was.
What did you love then?
I'd have sex and I'd turn over and that was it, right? I couldn't cuddle her. I couldn't lay with her in bed. I'd get up and go watch TV just to get away. I got my fix. I'm gone. And I go back and I love drugs more than anything. I love drugs more than Amy. I love drugs more than my kids. I love drugs more than I loved myself.
It's interesting, though, that the threat of losing Amy made you want to put down the drugs.
It wasn't a threat of losing Amy. It was the threat of losing a space that I was comfortable in taking care of, because Brennan didn't know how to take care of himself. Brennan didn't know how to, I knew how to cook, but I didn't know how to pay my bills. I didn't know how to buy groceries. I didn't know how to manage my life. Even though I was this guy out there front and stage and center speaking on behalf of youth issues. I was a youth leader at that time, and I say it, I look back now, and I became this advocate during the day, but an addict at night. And I made the advocate during the day become my go-to, to be busy, to be occupied, to make my money. But at night, I'd go home and I'd get high and drunk. And there was times I'd be at health conferences or justice symposiums, staying in my hotel room after the first night of the conference, being high out of my tree, still going. Because I couldn't find a point to stop. The only time I could stop is if there's nothing to sell or no more money, right?
Yeah. So you went from working at the mine site now, and I remember we had a conversation up in Pine House, and you told me that you got into politics and advocacy like really early on.
Right out of high school, right in high school, actually, I started getting involved with the community, being a voice for young people through the Student Representative Council, through the local Friendship Center. I did that. I became a youth executive before 16 years old, and legally, you're supposed to only be able to vote at 16 years old, and so being the youth rep on the Friendship Center Board of Directors, I couldn't vote, so I had to fight for that. Utilized other board of directors to support my cause and give the youth a voice and a vote at the table, just like everybody else sitting there. And we won our case. I ended up being the local board youth rep, which led to a junior mayorship with the community through the UMAYC dollars at the time, which funded our youth center, and it was youth directors driven, right? Youth gave the input on what we wanted in our community for activity-based and so on, and travel and things. And that led to a provincial youth executive seat with the Aboriginal Friendship Centers of Saskatchewan. My voice became stronger. Our voice became stronger to another table. And that eventually led to an election at the National Association of Friendship Centers.
And all of this while you are struggling and just lost in toxicity.
Yeah. Lost in toxicity, broken inside, no parents to support and nurture me because they're divorced, right? And I'm living with different people at the time, family, friends, Amy, who became my home and my space to do all of this, right? Leaving them behind. There were so many broken promises to Amy and my girls as my girls were born and growing, bringing them to Saskatoon, because it's funny, in the north, where are you going for holidays? We'd ask the non-Indigenous people at the mine, I'm going to Arizona, I'm going to Walt Disney and all that stuff. Where are you going? Oh, I think I'll go to Edmonton or down south Saskatoon.
Go to Saskatoon, yeah.
And so I'd promise Amy and the girls, let's go to Saskatoon, we'll get a hotel room at the Travelodge, we'll swim, we'll shop, I'll treat you guys, I'll pamper you.
Yeah.
day of. Sometimes the trips didn't happen because the night before, when the money's in the account, I'd be smoking it up or snorting it up, right? And I go till broke. I go until there's nothing left.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'd make it to Saskatoon because I wouldn't spend all the money. I started later. There wouldn't be drugs in town. Whatever the situation was, before we even get to the hotel, I had a night ball lined up. And then I would stay stuck in the hotel room, and the kids and Amy would be stuck there with me. They couldn't even go out and enjoy themselves. Send them to the pool. I could run to the bathroom, do a rail, and that's it. Once I started, I isolated from public, and I stayed sheltered, and I stayed closed, and I avoided everything that was real.
Yeah.
And I just got in my head.
Let's take a break and listen to today's sponsors.
Thank you.
Pisce Mashinaikan Ushche Michif. Sacred document from Michif.
Metis Nation Saskatchewan is pursuing its own sacred document with Canada. It's what they've been fighting for since 1885. Since Louis Riel died for the right to self-government, it's time for Métis people to take control of their own fate, for their ancestors, for their citizens, and for the generations to come.
It's our moment.
It's my future.
The time is now. Learn more at ourmoment.ca.
Okay, today's episode is also sponsored by EHN Canada. EHN Canada is Canada's leading provider of mental health and addiction services, providing evidence-based and medically assisted care with 1-year wraparound services for those suffering with substance use disorder. To learn more, find their link in the show notes below. Pine Lodge, the treatment center I went to 7 years ago when I got sober, offers inpatient addictions treatment and aftercare programming in Regina, Saskatchewan. To inquire about services or to make a donation, call 306-510-1891. Wellness News Choice for Healthy Living is a local resource that works to connect people to health and wellness related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals, locally allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. Are you affected by someone else's substance use? Family and friends can be okay and do recover. Naranon can help. Call Ronnie at 306-731-7573 for meeting information. To make contact or to learn more about today's sponsors, to check out our merch, or if you want to show some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are also in the show notes below. Back at it.
Nice.
Let's go.
So yeah, I talk about those times I promised the world to my wife and my kids, coming to Saskatoon, shopping, pampering them, and not really taking them anywhere. Saskatoon's a beautiful city. It's come a long way since then. It's a lot better now, I find, more attraction based. But back then too, like I remember Amy being pregnant and she was probably 8 months in, if not early 9, and ready to pop. And we bought money for a crib because I was working at the mine site. And then I also had a consulting gig outside of the mines when I was home. So it was 7 day in, 7 day out.
So you're set up.
I'm set up. I'm making over 7,000 take home a month. And
this is a long time ago.
2008, 2012, 14.
Yeah.
In those years. And so I'm coming home making over 7,000 a month plus travel and everything, benefits. And I'm landing and smoking crack right out of the gates. And when I'm on site, I get paid. So Amy, I would give her the money to pay the bills and whatnot needed to be. But when I come home, I would do up the rest. Even though I'd plan a weekend out with her and the kids. Sometimes, like I was saying, when she was pregnant, I remember we bought a crib and we were supposed to set it up, but I got into the crack and I had my consulting money came in, so I cashed my check, and I gave her about $1,000 to keep, and I took $3,000, and I went and jumped the fence to my neighbors, and I started smoking. And this is crack cocaine in Ile-à-La-Crosse. It was crumbs, like fucking crumbs. You're spending thousands of dollars on crumbs over and over. But when the money was there, I used to get my stomach sick. I'd be turning, my guts would be turning, I'd be dry heaving because I knew I had money, and I knew the drugs were coming because I would order it. So I jumped the fence. It was right there, and off I went. When I ran out of that $3,000, I remember jumping back over the fence, texting Amy first, trying to get that money back a little bit at a time, right? So she gave in. And then I remember there was $200 left out of the $1,000 I left her, and she's 8-9 months pregnant. I jumped the fence. I go there. She's setting up the crib, sitting on the floor by herself, putting it together. And here's me, careless, selfish, self-centered, everything you can name. I need that fucking money. Give me that money.
Wow.
And she's crying, she's swearing, she's screaming, and she threw the money at me and told me to get the hell out. I took the money without even thinking twice, and I walked away from her, from my oldest daughter at the time, Tiara, who was probably 2, and she's pregnant with Rihanna, and I walked away so easily because I got my money. I'm going to go get my drugs.
Yeah.
And I walked out. I jumped the fence, I smoked it, and I tried to come back later. It didn't happen. My stuff was flying out the back door.
Yeah.
And then again, the reoccurring cycle, get kicked out, start to think, how can I manipulate the system to get back in?
Yeah.
To get her to believe that I'm going to be okay, that I'm going to change.
Get back to safety.
Safety, right? Get back to safety, because where's Brennan going to go?
Yeah.
Parents are divorced. They don't live in Ile-à-La-Crosse. Our home that we grew up in, that our mom and dad worked hard to build, burned to the ground in 2016. And mom is living in BC at this time because she took my younger brother, who was living with her in Saskatoon, getting into trouble, and thought moving him to BC would help solve his problems. Didn't help, made it worse. My other brother was going through his own shit and shacked up and living with a lady that had other kids and apparently one of his, but later on found out it wasn't. But at the same time, he's still going through his stuff. So nowhere really to go.
So, and I'm sure there was countless moments. Now, let's jump ahead a little bit. So you woke up one day, and you were done. You got down south. What did your first year look like? Did you go to meetings? Did you engage in ceremony? Like, what did that look like? What worked for you?
So the last time that I took the step, that I made the decision to take care of Brennan, was February 26, 2022. And that was me coming to Saskatoon to stay at Comfy's Mloud house, a sober living house. And what led me to that was my TSN turning point, is what I call it in addiction, right? TSN turning point in hockey games and sports. And I call this, my TSN turning point in life was November of 2021. I'm sitting in that place, that garage, all by myself, drinking and drugging. And this was after I was evicted, and the sheriff kicked me out and so on. And so I moved into my plug's house. It was also my brother, right? But he was drug dealing at the time. Fell apart because we started smoking crack again. Lost out on his trade. And so I'm sitting in the garage, which we turned into a man cave, drinking by myself in November, middle of winter, wood heat going. Lost, just drinking 24 beers by myself, contemplating, what am I doing with myself? And throughout that 6 months that I was living there, there was, up in a corner, there was this rope, this white thing that just kept catching my eye. And this night I'm sitting there by myself drinking and being depressed and lonely and falling apart. I see this rope, so I finally make the effort to go and grab it. And here it is, this rope that's about 10 feet in length, has 2 loops at each end, a loop at each end. So I'm sitting there and I'm crying my eyes out, contemplating suicide, which I never thought I would, which I never did before. I never thought or spoke of suicide, but it's exactly what I was doing, because the amount of drugs that I put in my body, 2 ounces in a day and a half of cocaine, trying to stop my heart, but couldn't get to that point, right? I just finished it and needed more, wanted more, not needed, but wanted more, and just couldn't get it. But in this moment, I'm ready to commit suicide. I'm crying. I'm holding this rope, ready to put it over the rafters to hang myself. My phone goes off, and it's my... What is she? She's 14 now. She was 11 at the time, Rihanna. She's FaceTiming me, and she's crying. She's talking suicide, 11 years old.
Wow.
And her mom and I in this moment have been separated for 5 years. And it was October 2018, October 12th, 2018, she had kicked me out for the last time. And during that time, she met somebody else afterwards, right? A year later or so. And this guy apparently... came in, and they met on social media and so on. But in this moment, my daughters, because I was so caught up in addiction, I couldn't even protect my daughters from this guy, because he bothered my 2 oldest daughters the wrong way. And they cried to me about it. They cried to their mother. We got the RCMP involved. We were going to courts and stuff. But I wasn't present because I was caught up in my addiction. I was homeless. I was evicted and lost my job again with the region and stuff. So I'm sitting there, and she's crying suicide. And that right there was like, holy fuck, Brennan. It's time to wake up. Your daughters need you. And so in that moment, I reached out to Richard Quintel and Glenn McCollum, our president and CEO of the Metis Nation. And I just said, hey, I need some help. I'm ready. I need to go. I need to get help. I need to change who I am, change my situation so that I can take care of my babies. Because they were sexually abused by this guy, and their mom didn't believe it. And they were living with their mom because they couldn't live with me. And they weren't even allowed to visit me at this point because of where I was.
you already had relationships with Richard and Glenn?
Yeah. This was they fired me a year prior, right? So 2017 was the election. I'm sitting in Ile-à-La-Crosse, unemployed, looking for work at the time, but unemployed, and the election's happening, right? A legit election for a Metis Nation of Saskatchewan. And Ile-à-La-Crosse being a historic Métis community, strong Métis bloodlines, sitting in my living room wondering why nobody's having a debate, nobody's bringing the candidates, nobody's talking about this. So I took it upon myself through Facebook Messenger and contacts that I had, and brought 18 out of the 19 executive candidates to Ile-à-La-Crosse with in-kind contributions from the community leadership to bring them in for a debate. Organize it with my cell phone, did that through Facebook Messenger, brought them in, met Glenn, met many others that were running at that time, and wasn't supporting Glenn in that election. He knows this now. He knew it later. Him and his wife knew at that moment, but I was supporting another candidate, but I did this debate to bring it home, right?
Yeah.
And so connected with Glenn there, he saw what I was doing. I had it live streamed with the local cable company and so on. So
holy shit, man.
2017, I even ended up charging the candidates $10-20 just so I can go buy crack afterwards. And I
don't mean to laugh, but
I did.
It's just, to me,
and
like,
it worked.
But I mean, it just goes to show you like how the ingenuity that we can display.
Yeah.
You know, like from what you just said, you're in your garage and you're considering suicide and you're smoking crack, and but you're also bringing together candidates from different political arenas to Ile-à-Crosse, and you're like live streaming with Shaw Cable. I'm like, holy crap, man.
Local ICSI cable, right? Which we had in our community, digital cable was great. And I did that.
Yeah.
But again, I conned the candidates. I need some money to help me because it's all volunteer, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly, I got my money and I went to smoke it. And that was gone up in smoke in less than 20 minutes. But
so
just the way it goes. But me and Glenn's relationship started then.
Okay.
Him and his wife were sitting in the audience. I don't know until years later when I'm working with him on the road. But the election happened. He ends up winning. The candidate I was supporting lost. So I send Glenn a text congratulating him.
Mm-hmm.
That text message led to him calling me and us just having conversations, and him helping me understand what his visions were, where he wanted to take this nation and build something great. And so I bought in. He started bringing me to provincial Métis Council meetings to observe firsthand, have a firsthand experience with it. And from there, our relationship grew. I had some troubles that I was dealing with in the courts from when I was a local president. I took some money and was charged for that in 2014. And so I had to deal with that, right? I was under the influence. I was smoking crack. Light bulb goes off in my mind. I know where to get some money because we're not established as a local yet.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the bank account, even though our secretary and treasurer were supposed to be working on that. They didn't. So I took initiative. I'm applying for grants through duty to consult. We're getting it, $10,000 a pop. And so I opened up an account at the local Northern store just to store the money instead of in my dresser, which it was for 2 weeks, until one of my board members said, that's not a great idea. It didn't even dawn on me why it wasn't a great idea, because I thought I was being accountable. I was updating them and on every email correspondence. So I took it to the Northern, and the Northern store manager, they had closed down accounts there. But I asked him, I'm in a bind. I need a place until we can get these people to open up a bank account. So we did that, and that's where I got access to money. I took some money and used it for drugs, and it got caught, right? Which always happens to us. We always eventually get caught, right? Karma comes in any which way. So it happened. But I owned it. I took responsibility for it. And that's what I had to clean up when me and Glenn's relationship was building, right? And Glenn knew where I was coming from because he's lived an experience of alcoholism and violence and abuse, sexual abuse and all that stuff. He has his story. And our story's related. I
can't wait to have him.
Yeah, it'll be great. Yeah. I'm telling you, like, this man has helped me come along to where I am. And in his own way, some have taken it the wrong way. But it was me that needed to understand him in order to tolerate and accept and respect him. And I've been able to come to that point in my life.
Did you say tolerate?
Tolerate. Tolerance is one of the 8 principles, right?
I had to learn to tolerate Glenn. He's going to hear this,
It's not only Glenn, though. It's everybody around me. Anybody in my space. How am I going to tolerate them if I can't understand them? It's how I had to build a relationship with my mother. It's how I had to understand the choices my dad made, right? In order to tolerate, in order to accept and forgive what he's done to our family, to my brothers, to my mom. And it's part of the recovery. It's part of the nurturing. It's part of the growth. So Glenn and I's relationship started 2018. I come on as a consultant with the Environment Department of MNS, engaging with communities across the province. 19 to be exact. La Loche to Estevan did that. Court matters happen. I get a suspended sentence on the charge for fraud. That day, I phone Richard and Glenn. Hey, court rulings down, suspended sentence. Okay, Brennan, you're with me. That an hour later, I'm driving with Glenn and Verna to Winnipeg for meetings. Wow. And I became the executive assistant to the president. And I did that for a year and a half. But again, I'm still struggling with addiction.
Did they know it?
They knew it. They knew it. They tried to help me. Again, Glenn wanted me by his side. He was nurturing me. He saw the potential I had, right? The guy that was doing drugs, but brought 18 out of 19 candidates to Ile-à-La-Crosse, live streamed it on local cable and had it live streamed on Facebook. He's got something. Let's nurture it. Let's see if we can do it. So he tried. Richard tried. The nation tried. The elder tried, right? But I was at a point where I wasn't open to it yet. I was taking it personal when they were giving me shit, trying to tell me to do this, do that, and when it was all for the better, right? And I took it personal. I'd close up and I'd say, fuck you, and I'd order more drugs. Even on times when we're leaving the office, I'd have my cocaine at my doorstep, ready and waiting for me to get home and use. Because I could, and again, I go back, October 18th, 2018, Amy kicks me out. I don't know how to live tomorrow. When I learned that she's dating this new guy, they're engaged to be married. Now Brennan's struggling again, that being alone is coming into play. How do I live going forward without my wife, without my kids? I'm alone and I'm lost. I'm scared shitless. And I don't know how. And so to avoid all that, I go home from work after being busy, go home to being high. And I would get high until the next morning when it's time to go back to work, have a cold shower, and off I go. Sometimes I couldn't even go because I still had coke and I was just too high. Couldn't break away from it. So I'd stay numb, I'd stay high, and I'd stay in that zone for 5-6 days at a time. And eventually it got to a point where they couldn't help me anymore and they had to let me go. All that time too, sometimes the kids would come visit. And I'm ripping off drug dealers, getting high while my babies are sleeping there. Drug dealers banging on my door because I ripped them off, smashing my window while my babies are sleeping. Driving under the influence from one end of the city high with my baby sleeping in the back seat because I wanted to go get those drugs. They were more important than her safety, than our safety, and doing all that stuff. Glenn fired me. I came home during the pandemic there, spent 1.5 to 2 years. I partied. I didn't do drugs for a couple of months, but then I got back into it, got my own place, became the crack house in Ile-à-La-Crosse. And I did that and eventually started working for the region. And so again, advocate during the day, addict at night, right? Continued that, became the party house, and eventually lost that job and just started drinking heavily again. January or early February was the first week of February that new year that Richard and Glenn drove to Ile-à-La-Crosse to come and see me.
Just to see you. Just
to see me. They wanted to see where I was at. I was telling them I was sober, I was clean, but I have eczema on my hands because of the drug use. And I look like a raccoon. If you go back, how broken and lost I was. My head, I shaved my hair because I didn't care how my appearance was. Whereas today, I got a mirror in my living room just to make sure everything's going well, right?
Just make sure you're fire before you walk out.
Walk out on the space that you're going to go into, right?
Hell yeah, man.
But in that moment, I didn't give a shit. I was broken. I was lost. I couldn't even look in the mirror at that person. I didn't want to look in that mirror, and they show up. And I was smoking the night before. They show up. I had EI in my bank account still. And we drove around the community. We talked a little bit about what the plan was going to be. And then we stopped outside the regional office and they said, Brent, stand outside for a bit. We're going to talk. And Glenn later tells me, but in that moment he's not sober. He's not healthy. And Richard is like, holy shit, this guy's lost. This guy is broken. This guy is hurting. And so there was a plan. You're going to come to Mloud house. You're going to go in a sober living house. You're going to stay a minimum of 6 months if you want to get your job back. And we did that. I ended up that morning, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to go. I sold everything I had from my mattress, my box spring, to a dresser, to TV, fireplace TV stand. And these are all material things that since Amy kicked me out in October of 2018, I had to reestablish myself to buy for my new homes, right? So this is like the fourth time over that I'm buying things and selling for drugs and to keep going and stay drunk, right? So I did that. The last step was selling my mattress. Went to stay at my uncle's house because he was gone for the week, so he asked me to watch it. And then I woke up that morning and I found a ride to Saskatoon. And I got a travel check to get to Saskatoon. I spent that the night before. And I lied to the person driving me to Saskatoon. I said, I can get you a hotel room and they'll give you mileage. They gave him a hotel room, but the mileage never came because I had got it and I spent it. But he still drove me, and I still haven't made amends to that. I haven't talked to him about it yet. I do say hi and things like that, but I haven't talked to him about it. I haven't told him the truth. It's just, it's there, but I haven't went there yet. And so I go to Saskatoon and Mloud House. I'm scared shitless. I get there about 11 o'clock at night, and I'm walking in, and a colleague of mine, a good family, a friend of mine is there. She went and got groceries for me because you got to have your own groceries there. You get your apartment suite, you're sharing it with another roommate. And so I get there and I'm scared and I'm hauling my stuff in, and I get to the door and I see one of these, a fellow northerner, and that fear and all that weight that I was carrying just dropped and it went away because there was a fellow northerner there. And maybe it was because he had a good spirit. He has a good spirit, I should say. He's not gone. He has a good spirit. Or it was the safe space I was walking into, right? So I walked in there and I did that 6 months. I was working for the CEO a little bit at a time, after a couple of months, slowly transitioning back into the workplace, but not so much because I was so broken in my skin and everything about me. My appearance was just awful, right? Because of all the drugs and the alcohol I did in the last year and then some. And it just led to me being in a safe space to grow, to take care of my mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being. And the spiritual connection you talk about with your last person you interviewed, the connection and the purpose. You talk about the beauty of Ile-à-Crosse and how we take advantage of it. We don't even realize it's there. We can't even learn to appreciate it until we find that connectedness, which is related to our culture as Métis people and even the First Nations, right? And that's where it took me. It took my spiritual connection to figure out the rest, the physical well-being, the mental and emotional. The spiritual connection gave me understanding, gave me something to connect to, which led to my purpose, understanding of what my purpose is on this path, on this journey we call life. And that led to my physical well-being, which was physical activity. Just walking 20 minutes a day gave me an opportunity to decompress life and everything that came with it, whether it was personal or work. And that led to balance with emotional and mental balance, right? It helped me process things. It also helped my appearance. I became healthier looking. I loved to look in the mirror and who I was, what I was seeing, the reflection, right? I started to love and appreciate this person I was seeing and getting to know. After, at this time I was, where am I now? 41. I think I was 38 when I got to Mloud House. But started to love and appreciate what I was seeing, who I was seeing, and what I was becoming. And a lot of it was the help of Tammy at Mloud House, Tammy Eisbister, and just talking out loud with her. And we built a bond right away because we had similar experiences. She knew my dad from a past experience, and my late dad at the time, and so that helped us bond. And we started connecting. And as addicts, we isolate, right? You take a thought or a moment in your life, and you start to think about it yourself, try to work through it alone, and you isolate. It gets bigger and bigger, becomes worse,
dirtier,
right? And it's like an essay. You're writing an essay. Here's my bubble. Here's my topic. That's where I was. I had these topics, but I would work alone and I'd isolate and I'd avoid it eventually by getting high. In this moment, I'm sitting across Tammy like I am you now, and we talk about what's going on in Brennan's mind, and we would work through it out loud, writing this paper, but talking about it. And we'd work through it together, through her experiences, through her education, through my experiences, and through what other people I've successes are, or what I call the do's and don'ts of life. And now I've taken my experiences with my parents who knew how to work and provide without nurturing and loving us, and I've combined it, the do's and don'ts of life. And that's what I do with my personal well-being, my kids' well-being, my partner's well-being. And there's times, yes, you catch yourself slipping, but I'm more aware and focused now because I'm healthier. I'm in control. I've taken care of Nihki, my being, and I'm at that point where I can grab it. I'm aware of it, and I can reel it back in, and I can correct it my own way. And that's what Mloud House helped me discover, right? Who is this person and what it's going to be? And it took me to go to ceremony back home with an elder. And there's a lot of ceremonies out there. And people go, and all the power to them. And Mloud House did that too. They took the clients out to ceremonies, but I wouldn't go because I connected to one elder. I wanted to find that elder. I needed to trust this person with my life, to take me to a space that's to give me groundedness, right? And that was Elder Jerry Gardner in Ile-à-La-Crosse. I went home and had a sweat ceremony with him. And in that first round, I remember he asked me to be the doorman, the rock man, and I closed the door. And he starts drumming, splashing the rocks. And in that moment, the rush from my toes all the way up through my body, out my eyes, are tears flowing. All the pain and the hurt that I carried for 38 years came through, flowing through my body in tears, right out of my eyes. And it just flowed. I couldn't control it. It just flowed as soon as he started hitting that drum. And that was the first round, and there's 4 rounds in a sweat ceremony. So by the second, third round, I started listening, paying attention to what the singing was. What is the message? Where's the spirits? Where's the grandfathers, the grandmothers in this ceremony? How am I connecting here? And when I started dialing in and focusing to what was being ceremonied here, Kaimato, the drum song, and the words of the elder in the ceremony, Kaimato, no more crying. No more hurting, no more pain, because I'm healing. The other elder, there was a female elder with us in the ceremony, and I remember in between rounds, she's asking Jerry in Cree, why is he heating up the rock so much, like making them red hot? And Jerry responded, because he's healing. And that was my moment of healing, my moment of not forgetting the past, but learning to accept it, to let go of it, to not live in fear of it anymore.
Not shut the door on it.
Not shut the door on it, embrace it, and go forward with the do's and don'ts of life. The doing better to be better than I was, right? Learning from it.
What's the don't?
Huh?
What's the don'ts?
The don'ts are the abusing your wife, hitting your wife, being sexually abused, right? The violence, all that stuff. And so being an alcoholic and cheating your family out of something greater, taking shortcuts. In Mloud, I wouldn't even cut across a parking lot because I needed to train my mind. I can't take shortcuts. And if I cut across that parking lot, then I can lie over here again. I can take a shortcut. And I became a deadly liar, the king of cons, right? The manipulator. And I remember a former MLA saying that he's the king of cons, and I embraced it. I ran with it because I was. And I still am. I'm good at that game, but I use it in a good way now. And that's part of the do's and don'ts. I will not use it to manipulate you or lie to you. I'll use it to help you understand and get into a place where we're doing this for the right reasons. And it's not just about us. It's about the larger scale. And that brings me to my job, and why I'm good at it is because I understand it's not about Brennan. It's not about Glenn McCollum. It's not about one individual. It's about a nation of people coming together and supporting them and giving them the resources to make their lives better.
So, and that beautiful segue, actually. I was going to go there right away if you didn't, but you did. So, you got your job back. That must have been an experience to step back into that position with a clearer mind and a stronger heart and all of that. But we're seeing all over town the banners or the billboards and it's very loud, and it's going to get louder. Is our moment, the movement towards self-government from Metis Nation Saskatchewan, and there's a modern treaty. How is all of that going to help people who were lost like you were?
So you go back to when I was in university in L'Orange. I remember watching the videos in class in the Native Studies with Ray Smith, our lecturer at the time. And there's the Jim Sinclairs of the world on those videos at First Ministers conferences from the 1980s, fighting for Métis and First Nations rights with Canadian governments. And I'm like, man, one day we're going to get there. One day I want to be that person sitting at the table. And hence I was involved already, right? And I continued to build up to where I am now. Then I get here and I'm with the Metis Nation, never in my wildest dreams. And I've been involved in community since I was 12, 13 years old. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever think a Métis would be talking about a treaty. And here we are, our Metis Nation Saskatchewan government, not an organization. We've went from an organization, a proposal-based organization, $400,000 proposal-based organization, to an operating $280 million government representing 80,000 Métis citizens in this province, officially 30 through our provincial registry. But here we are doing the work for our people, giving our people a place to call. Because when I was in university in L'Orange, I had to move to Saskatoon for a semester, but NORTEP couldn't provincially fund me because I left their campus. So I phoned the Metis Nation at the time, and they couldn't help me. They sent me to GDI. GDI was only eligible to take care of those in tech and trades, but I was in post-secondary working towards a degree. So I had nowhere to go. Nobody could help me. My family wanted to help. I said no. So I said no to that. But later on, here I am working with Glenn McCollum, the Métis Nation. We're in Ottawa, and he's signing agreements, funding agreements, one specifically for post-secondary education. I think it was $12 million a year for 10 years, or $10 million a year for 10 years. And we come back from Ottawa, and I'm like, okay, Prez, what are we going to do? And we're listening to the other governing members while we're in Ottawa, and they're going to take time to come up with their plans, a year or so. And I share my story with Prez, where my funding was derailed. I had nowhere to turn as a Métis person. So he's like, go get the Minister of Education, who was Minister Earl Cook at the time, next door to his office, and the director of GDI, Jordy McCaffrey at the time. Yeah. Bring him in here and let's have a meeting. Because I shared, why are we going to wait? We can't afford to wait, because look at what it did to me, and look at how where I went when I had nowhere to turn, no supports, no resources, and look at where I ended up.
Man.
And then you take that moment, and he says, go and get them, and I'm sharing. GDI has a formula that they use for ISETs. We could easily implement that into post-secondary and deliver. So we had 6 months before fall classes started. He says, get them in here. We did it. They have a formula. 3 months, we had 247 Métis students in this province registered to go to post-secondary schooling, fully funded that fall.
Isn't that interesting, the power of story? Yeah. Get them in here, tell them your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly why I do what I do.
And that's the way of the Métis too, right? What you do, the stories, the power of story of our people and our traditions, our practices, our elders.
Yeah,
you cannot facilitate or workshop elders to feed you information that you need to do your job.
Yeah,
you need to let them tell their stories, and that's something our government needs to understand. Is we're a distinction-based government. We're a distinct people. We're unique. You cannot mainstream textbook me. You got to understand me. You need to hear me and let us tell our stories the way we tell them. You need to engage with us at our traditional gatherings, not in some hotel conference room.
Yeah. I feel like you're putting words to something that I already understood since I started this project 3.5 years ago. I knew I was on a trajectory, and I knew story was important, and I knew it had the power to save lives and influence people.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and just doing that next right thing, you know, has led us here to sitting at this table today. So, but, you know, having said all of what you just said there, how is this modern treaty going to bolster that, to improve that, to make it even easier?
So you look at what we've done to date, right? In the last 7 years, again, 400,000 proposal-based organization to an operating $280 million government that represents and delivers program services for Métis citizens across this province, North, Central, and South. North, Central, and South have different realities, different hardships, different resources. I can't go to a hardware store in Ile-à-La-Crosse to get what I need to fix my home, to repair my home. Whereas in Saskatoon, it's right there. I can do that. In Ile-à-La-Crosse, in the north, we're isolated like rural communities, northern communities. We're isolated. You got to go through a process. There's freight costs that come up. And so there's an increase in costs and expenses, right? So we deliver emergency home repair program, and the funding formula is different for those north, central, and south for those reasons. There's post-secondary funding available. C92 is coming, where Métis Child and Family Services, we take care of our own based on our identity, culture, values, and language. Based on our understanding of our people and their needs. They're not taking them out of our homes, out of our communities, so that they become foreign to a place, right, to a home. And that's what the treaty will do. It'll just expand our horizon. It'll give us more resources than we can ever imagine to take care of our people the way our people should be taken care of. And that's through the 4 pillars of which are the foundation of our government: identity, culture, values, and language.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you want to throw in here?
I just want to say recovery's a beautiful thing. It was a hard road. There's a lot of support. I had to put myself in a safe space. I had to surround myself with the right people, and I continue to identify who's no good for me and who's in the wrong, who shouldn't be in my space, right? I own it. I'm in control. But it all started with Brennan taking care of Brennan. As the elder taught me, Nikki, my being first, take care of that, then everything else will trickle down. Because me taking ownership of my life, changing who I am and where I was, no longer living in fear of what was, I have 6 people in my home that are going to have better outcomes. That has also trickled down to my other brother who I lived with in that cold house, his family of 6. So there's 12 lives have been changed because of one person changing his life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for stopping in, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Keep doing what you're doing. It's powerful.
All right, take care.
Take care. Thanks.
All right, if you got something out of that, please hit that like button at the bottom of the screen. Leave us a comment. We want to hear your thoughts. Did you learn something today? Did you not learn something today? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Let us know. We are here to foster productive conversations about substance use here in Saskatchewan, across Canada and beyond. That's all I've got for you. So if you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify and all the podcast platforms. That's it. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.